I used to believe my little blue house on Willow Crest Lane was the safest place in my world. I bought it 4 years ago for $390,000, pouring every bit of my savings and courage into that decision. It had white shutters, a small brick walkway, and a cozy porch swing that creaked gently whenever the wind came in from the harbor. I remember sitting on that swing during the first week I moved in, feeling proud, feeling grown. I had built a life for myself in Boston, a life no one had handed to me. My house felt like a promise I made to myself, a quiet vow that I was done with chaos and ready for peace. Then I met Daniel. He walked into my life like someone arriving late to a play he already knew by heart. Soft-spoken, polite, steady, always observing. He worked as a financial analyst for a firm in the city and dressed in the same calm blues and grays that he claimed helped him think clearly. I fell for the gentleness he carried in his movements, the way his voice softened when he talked about his favorite classical music from Europe, or how he believed every problem could be solved with patience. Maybe I wanted to believe in him because I was tired of being strong alone. When he moved into my house a year later, I felt relieved. I thought sharing my space with someone meant warmth, safety, and partnership. And at first, he seemed dedicated to small acts of care that felt thoughtful. He made me tea every night, chamomile with a little honey, and he always said he liked ending our days with something warm. I loved that routine. I loved how he brushed my hair behind my ear before he handed me the cup. I wanted so badly for it to mean something good. But the forgetting began not long after. It started with moments so small I brushed them away. I would misplace my phone, forget a conversation, lose track of an entire hour before bedtime. I told myself it was stress from my job at the insurance office. 12-hour workdays were enough to confuse anyone, I thought. But the gaps widened. Some mornings I woke up feeling like I had been underwater all night, gasping for air the moment I opened my eyes. My hands shook. My legs felt weak. My head throbbed in a dull, heavy way that scared me. Then came the bruises. The first one was on my inner arm, a dark shadow shaped like fingers. I found it after a shower and stared at it for at least a minute, trying to remember anything that could explain it. I showed Daniel, and he laughed gently, saying I must have bumped into the counter again. He had an answer for everything, but the answers never felt right. Within days, more bruises appeared. My collarbone, my thighs, my wrist. It was as if someone was touching me in the dark while I wasn't awake enough to fight back. And every morning after those nights, the heavy fog in my head seemed even worse. One Friday at work, I overheard a coworker joking about her boyfriend giving her tea every night and calling himself her personal sleep specialist. People laughed, but something inside me twisted sharply. Nightly. Sleep. Weakness. Memory gaps. Bruises. I felt my fingers go cold. Something in me woke up in that moment and refused to sit quietly again. That night, when Daniel handed me the tea, I smiled like nothing was wrong. My heart felt like it was trying to punch its way out of my chest. He kissed my forehead and said he would take a shower first. The moment he walked into the bathroom, I carried the cup to the sink, poured its contents down the drain, and rinsed it so clean nothing could betray me. Then I set it on my nightstand and crawled into bed, forcing my body to relax against the mattress. It felt like preparing for a storm inside a small room. I could hear my pulse in my ears. I tried to breathe slowly, but every inhale felt sharp. I kept reminding myself to stay still no matter what. At 2:17 a.m., the bedroom door creaked open. I let my eyelashes lower to a thin slit. The moonlight from the window cast a faint glow across the room, just enough for me to see his outline. Daniel stepped inside quietly, wearing latex gloves. The sight of them nearly made me gasp. He carried a small black bag I had never seen before, the kind used by people who do things they never want discovered. He approached the bed with calm, practiced steps. I stayed frozen, my limbs limp against the sheets, my breathing slow and even. He lifted my arm, placing it at a specific angle before photographing it with his phone. He tilted my chin upward and took another photo. He moved with a strange precision, as if he had done this many times before and knew exactly what he wanted. He collected swabs from the inside of my knee and from my neck. He taped small patches onto my thighs, pressing them down as if gathering something invisible. Then he placed each item into a sealed pouch inside the black bag. The way he handled everything reminded me of someone preparing evidence or collecting it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to jump up and run out of the house barefoot. But terror held every muscle hostage. When he finally stepped out of the room, closing the door with that same gentle care he used when handing me tea, my body broke. I curled around myself, shaking so violently I thought I might fall off the bed. Tears came silently. My breath refused to steady. Every inch of my skin crawled with panic. My house no longer felt like a home. It felt like a trap he had built slowly, quietly, and with terrifying patience. And the worst realization hit me all at once. Whatever he had been doing to me had been happening for a long time. The morning after witnessing Daniel in the dark was one of the hardest mornings of my life. I had to pretend nothing was wrong while every inch of my skin felt like it was crawling with secrets I didn't ask for. When I woke up, he was already in the kitchen making breakfast. He smiled at me as if he were any ordinary partner, pouring orange juice and asking whether I had slept well. I swallowed my fear and forced a smile. I even thanked him for the tea I had enjoyed, though my stomach twisted at the lie. I kissed his cheek before work, even though my lips trembled. He didn't seem to notice. I felt like I was splitting into two versions of myself. The one he saw, who acted calm and safe, and the real me, the one who felt like a cracked vase trying to hold itself together. I couldn't let him see the truth. Not yet. I needed proof, something undeniable, something that could not disappear if he sensed my fear. So that afternoon, when I returned home before him, I began searching the house. At first, I thought I was being dramatic, imagining things, thinking I'd find nothing more than dust and loose papers. I checked the bedroom drawers. Nothing. I opened the boxes in the hall closet. Only winter clothes. I even checked behind the couch and under the bed, ridiculous places for secrets, but fear makes you check everywhere. Still nothing. I almost gave up. But while putting a sweater back into the attic storage, I noticed something odd. One of the wooden panels on the far right wall didn't sit flush like the others. It was slightly tilted, almost invisible unless you were already suspicious. My fingers shook as I touched it. The panel shifted with barely any pressure. That small movement sealed something inside me, confirming the truth I was too afraid to say aloud. Behind the panel sat a metal case. It wasn't dusty. It wasn't forgotten. It had been placed there with intention, with care, with routine. I carried it to the attic floor and stared at it for at least a minute. My breath trembled in my chest. There was a small lock, but not a strong one. I ran downstairs for a screwdriver, came back up, and jammed the tip into the latch until it snapped open. The lid lifted, and my world tilted. Inside were photographs of me. Hundreds of them. My hands shook so violently that I dropped several photos onto the floor. Many showed me unconscious in the same bed I thought I loved. Some showed me with my arm extended, my legs positioned, my head tilted at angles I would never voluntarily hold. Every one of them looked like a still shot from a crime scene. Some were labeled with dates. Others had coded notes written beneath them. I didn't understand the code, but I understood the violation. My breath came in short gasps as I kept digging through the box. Under the stacks of photos were folders. Dozens of folders. Each with a woman's name, some from Chicago, some from Denver, some from London, and others from smaller towns around America and Europe that I didn't recognize. Each file held pictures, notes, timelines, and even logs of large payments. $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, sometimes in pounds, sometimes in dollars. Some names had red labels, some blue. I didn't know what the colors meant, but nothing about any of it felt random. When I found a flash drive taped to the bottom of the case, my hands went numb. I hurried downstairs, plugged it into Daniel's laptop, and opened the folders one by one. My heart felt like a drum beating inside my throat. There were organized records of every woman. Notes about their routines, their weaknesses, their medications, their partners, their addresses, their injuries, their photographs, their reactions. Then I found my name. Not once, not twice, but in an entire folder of its own. Inside that folder were detailed logs of my sleep patterns, my bruises, my work schedule, my body temperature on certain nights, and even the times I tended to fall asleep after drinking the tea he prepared. There were messages he had sent to several unknown numbers. Some of the messages were coded, but I could still understand the meaning beneath the symbols. He was reporting on me. He wasn't just hurting me for his own reasons. He was delivering me, documenting me, measuring me. I stared at the screen until my stomach twisted so violently I had to run to the bathroom and vomit. The taste of fear stayed in my mouth long after I rinsed the sink. I needed someone I trusted. Someone who wouldn't doubt what I had seen. Someone who could help me breathe again. So I called Emily, my sister. She lived in New York, and the moment she heard my voice, she knew something was wrong. She drove through the night, arriving at my house around 11. When she walked in and saw the bruises on my legs, her whole face hardened in a way I had never seen. She didn't ask me to calm down or explain slowly. She hugged me and whispered that she wasn't going anywhere. But we couldn't stop there. I showed her the photos, the files, the messages. She covered her mouth with her hand, and her breath hitched. She said we needed someone with experience, someone who understood danger. Our neighbor James came next. James had been a police sergeant for 30 years before retiring. He had always checked on me when storms hit or when someone unfamiliar parked on our street. I trusted him. When he saw the evidence, his jaw clenched so tightly the veins in his neck strained. He said this wasn't the behavior of one dangerous man. This was part of something bigger, something organized, something that moved like a machine. James contacted a former colleague, Detective Harper, who worked with an agency that handled crimes across state lines. When she arrived the next afternoon, she took one look at the files and said I needed to keep pretending everything was normal. She installed tiny cameras in the bedroom, hallways, kitchen, and even near the back door. Before leaving, she touched my shoulder gently and gave me a safe word to use if anything went wrong. That night, I crawled into bed with a hollow ache in my chest. My life had become a performance. Every smile is a mask. Every word is a lie. Every step is a calculation. And every night that followed, I lay still in the dark, waiting to see the man I once trusted reveal the monster he truly was. The days leading up to the trap felt like I was living inside my own nightmare. I moved through my house like a guest in someone else's life, careful with every word, every gesture, every breath. I had to act like nothing had changed, even though everything inside me had broken. Daniel moved around the house with the same calm confidence he always had, but now every soft smile, every gentle touch, every moment he stood too close made my stomach twist. I felt like he could sense something different in me, so I made myself smaller, quieter, just like Detective Harper instructed. The plan was simple in theory, but terrifying in reality. I would pretend to drink the tea again. He would think I was unconscious. And he would go through whatever ritual he had followed for months. Except this time, every moment would be recorded by the tiny cameras Harper hid around my bedroom. She said she needed evidence that no one could argue with, evidence that would hold up in court, evidence that would expose the entire network behind him. But knowing the plan didn't help me sleep. Emily had moved into the house secretly, hiding in the attic crawlspace with her phone, ready to call Harper if anything went wrong. I hated the thought of her being so close to danger, but she refused to leave. She said she wouldn't let me face the darkest night of my life alone. Sometimes late at night I could hear the faintest scratch from above, just enough to remind me she was there. Outside, James pretended to fix his fence for hours each day, though there was nothing wrong with it. He wanted to keep an eye out, watching for any unusual movement, any sign that Daniel sensed the walls closing in. Detective Harper and her team rotated in shifts, waiting inside a surveillance van parked a block away. Every time I walked past a window, I wondered if they were watching me in real time, seeing how my fingers trembled or how often I looked over my shoulder. By the night of the trap, I felt like a ghost inside my own skin. That evening began like all the others. Daniel handed me the tea with his quiet smile, the same smile he used the first night he ever made it. I held the cup gently, pretending to feel grateful. When he turned away to adjust the thermostat, I poured the tea into the plant beside the table. My heart hammered so hard I felt dizzy. I rinsed the cup in the sink just like always, then walked back into the bedroom with steps so steady I barely recognized them as mine. I lay under the thin blanket, pretending to drift off. It took a full hour for my breathing to settle into the slow rhythm of sleep. I couldn't let him see even a flicker of tension. If he suspected I was awake, everything would collapse. At 1:58 a.m., the house settled into silence. The heater hummed softly, the refrigerator clicked every few minutes, and somewhere outside, a car passed slowly down the street. I stared at the ceiling, barely allowing myself to breathe. My hands were hidden beneath the covers, squeezed so tight my nails dug into my palms. Then at 2:12 a.m. I heard it. Soft creak. The unmistakable groan of the wooden floorboard near the bedroom door. My eyelids lowered just slightly, enough for me to see him through narrow slits. Daniel entered the room wearing latex gloves. There was no hesitation in his steps, no uncertainty. He carried the same black bag whose contents had already haunted me for days. He placed it on the floor beside the bed, unzipped it slowly, and began arranging the items inside like he had done this countless times. He lifted my arm first, positioning it gently, almost tenderly. He took photographs, the faint click of his phone sounding far louder in the silence of the room. Then he tilted my head, brushing my hair away from my face, and took another photo. He whispered something into a small recorder, calmly describing what he was doing, as if he were documenting a science experiment instead of a human being. My heart thudded so hard I thought the blanket might move. He pressed a cold instrument against the inside of my arm, holding it there as if waiting for a reaction. When none came, he reached into his bag for a small adhesive patch and stuck it against my thigh. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But I stayed perfectly still. Then he pulled out his phone and typed a message. Just one text, one line, one signal. It was enough. Everything happened at once. The bedroom door burst open so violently that Daniel stumbled back. Voices boomed through the hallway. Flashlights cut through the dark like blades. Emily exploded out of the attic crawlspace, screaming my name as she rushed into the room. James charged through the back entrance with another officer behind him. Detective Harper appeared in the doorway, her gun raised, her voice commanding him to step away. For the first time in all the months I had known him, Daniel's face changed. But not to shock, not to fear, not even to guilt. He looked annoyed, mildly irritated, as if the night's interruption was an inconvenience he hadn't scheduled. As officers tackled him and grabbed the phone from his hand, his eyes locked on mine. They were cold. Me. As if he were looking at something that belonged to him and had suddenly misbehaved. That stare chilled me more than anything he had ever done. He didn't see a victim. He saw a possession withholding obedience. As he was dragged out of my bedroom, still wearing latex gloves, still breathing calmly, I felt something inside me shift. Kind of cracking. A kind of awakening. I wasn't afraid anymore. Because the man standing in handcuffs wasn't the man I once trusted. He wasn't the gentle partner I invited into my home. He wasn't even the monster I had imagined in the dark. He was a stranger I had survived. The morning after Daniel's arrest felt unreal, as if I had slipped into someone else's life and didn't quite know how to fit into my own skin anymore. My house was filled with people and noise. Officers moving equipment out of the bedroom, detectives asking follow-up questions, Emily refusing to let go of my hand even when she needed to step away to talk to someone else. I sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, sipping water that tasted like nothing. I kept touching my own arms, almost expecting fresh bruises to appear like they used to. For the first time in months, I had woken up without a foggy mind, without aching limbs, without confusion. The clarity frightened me because it reminded me of how long I had lived without it. Detective Harper sat beside me after a while, her expression softer than the night before. She told me they had found more evidence in Daniel's car and at a storage unit he kept across town. Encrypted drives, more photos, more files, bank transfers to and from names that appeared in several states, communications with people in America and Europe, records that didn't just show isolated violence but a chain, system, a network that treated women like data points. I listened in silence, gripping the blanket until my fingers went numb. Every new detail felt like another layer of the nightmare pulling itself open. I asked Harper how many women had been hurt. She didn't answer at first. She looked down, inhaled slowly, and said they couldn't be sure yet, but the early count was far higher than she wanted to believe. By the end of that week, 23 survivors had stepped forward. Some were from Chicago, others from Denver, a few from London and Edinburgh, one from a small coastal town in Maine. Their stories rippled across the investigation like echoes of my own. They all described the same foggy nights, the same unexplained bruises, the same fear of something happening while they slept. Some had left their partners without ever knowing the full truth. Others had convinced themselves their memories were failing. Hearing their stories hit me like a punch. I wasn't alone, and that truth brought both comfort and heartbreak. The news spread faster than I expected. Reporters camped outside the courthouse. Lawyers issued statements. Families of victims demanded justice. The network Daniel was part of began to unravel. Names surfaced. Arrests were made in multiple states. Investigators followed trails of money transfers, hidden drives, secret accounts, and coded messages that turned out not to be very coded at all once the pattern was understood. During all of this, I stayed at Emily's apartment in New York for a while. I didn't want to be alone in my house, even though the locks had been changed and security cameras were installed. Every creak in the walls made me jump. Every shadow in the hallway made my skin prickle. Emily kept reminding me I was safe now, but fear doesn't leave just because danger is gone. It lingers like smoke long after the fire has been put out. One afternoon, while sitting by her window overlooking the street below, I made a decision. I would sell the house on Willow Crest Lane. I had loved it once, but it held too many memories now. Too many nights I couldn't forget, no matter how much I wanted to. With Emily's help, I listed it. A couple from Boston bought it for $380,000. I wished them well, prayed they would fill it with memories far brighter than mine. After selling the house, I moved to a small town in Maine near the coast. I bought a cottage with white shutters and a tall oak tree in the yard, almost like a gentler version of the home I once believed in. The ocean was only a short walk away, and sometimes I could hear the waves from my bedroom window. Something was healing about that steady rhythm, something that reminded me I was still alive, still moving, still here. But the biggest change in my life came months later. The survivors who had come forward had been placed in contact with one another through the investigators. At first, we exchanged messages in a small online group, unsure of how much to share. But slowly, each of us opened up. Late-night messages turned into long phone calls. Then we began hosting virtual meetings, telling our stories out loud for the first time, finally hearing our own voices reclaim the things we had lost. I realized that while each of us had lived through our own version of the nightmare, we shared a single truth. Silence had protected him and every man like him. I refused to be silent anymore. With the encouragement of the group, I reached out to a counselor who specialized in trauma. She helped me understand that healing wasn't about forgetting what happened, but about building a life strong enough to carry the memories without letting them control me. Slowly, piece by piece, I stitched myself back together. Some days I felt rebuilt. Other days I felt undone. But the movement mattered. Even the smallest steps counted. Eventually, I started a support project with two of the strongest women from the survivor group. We named it the Willow Network, after the street where my story had once begun, not to honor the past but to reclaim it. We offered support to women dealing with trauma, fear, or unexplained patterns in their relationships. We partnered with counselors, detectives, and legal advisors who volunteered their time. At first, only a few women reached out. Then dozens. Then hundreds. Each story I heard cut deep, but each one also strengthened me, reminding me why I had survived, why I needed to keep speaking, why silence could never be an option again. Sometimes I still see Daniel's cold stare in my dreams. Sometimes I wake up with my heart pounding. But when those moments come, I remind myself of the women who have found hope through our work, and the ones who finally understand they aren't losing their minds or imagining their pain. They aren't alone. None of us is. My past tried to steal my voice. Now I use that voice to save others. And every time a woman looks at me with relief in her eyes, I feel the strength of something new inside me. Not fear. Not shame. Something far greater. Power rising from the ruins.